Welcome to our book talk session with Goretti Kyomuhendo, and I'm looking forward to having an interesting hour. So, my name is Frankline Sunday. I'm a journalist, writer, and publisher. And today we are speaking with Goretti, and Goretti Kyomuhendo is a leading Ugandan novelist and founding director of the African Writers Trust and to Bears African Books. She is the author of 4 novels. The First Daughter came out in 1986. Secrets No More came out in 1999, which won the Uganda National Literary Award for Best Novel. And Waiting, which came out in 2007, published by the Feminist Press in New York and translated into Spanish, and Whispers from Vera. In 2014, she published the Essential Handbook for African Creative Writers. She has also published several children's books and short stories. Goretti holds a master's degree in creative writing from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, where she also taught creative writing. She is the first Ugandan woman to receive an International Writing Program fellowship from the University of Iowa. Goretti has been recognized internationally for her work as a writer and literary activist. She has chaired the judging panel for the King Prize and also served as a judge for the Commonwealth Book Prize. And in 2019, she was featured among the 100 most influential Africans by the New African. Goretti is also a founding member of Frankline, a women's writers association and publishing house in Uganda, and she also served as its first director for the first 10 years. Welcome, Goretti.
Thanks so much.
Yes. So I think to start us off, for audience members who might not have read the book, we'll start by a short reading from an excerpt from Promises. So, Goretti, take it away.
Thank you so much, Franklin, for that introduction. And good morning to all of you. Thank you for coming to listen to our book talk. I'm going to read from the first chapter of Promises, newly published. It came out last month. So I'll read from the first chapter. It should have been their wedding day, a simple but formal ceremony at the registry office with 2 witnesses. Then they would settle into their forever after. The white wedding would follow later. They had agreed 3 years back when they had had their traditional Kwanjula ceremony. Instead, Kagawa spent most of the day with a travel agent who was trying to get him a cheaper air ticket to the UK. And Ajuna spent hers at home plowing through a pile of undergraduate essays. The traditional ceremony had depleted their finances, Ajuna's to be precise, since Kagawa was still unemployed. They were now in a desperate situation. They needed to find at least £300 more in 4 days' time for Kagawa's travel. How had they come to this? Today, Ajuna had marshaled her not-so-good cooking skills to prepare Kagawa's favorite food, matoke and smoked fish in granite sauce, with steamed dodo on the side. He declined her offer of a late lunch, saying he didn't feel like eating or drinking anything, and headed straight to the bedroom. After a while, Ajuna followed him. He had undressed to his underpants, his shirt and jeans strewn on the floor. Ajuna picked up his clothes, folded and laid them on the chair at the foot of the bed. Was he already asleep? Straightened out on the bed facing the wall, his tall frame extended to the house, to the base of the bed, his feet touching the chair. Ajuna stripped off her kitenge wrapper, the only garment covering her body, and stretched out beside him. She slipped her hand inside his underwear, pressed her breasts against his smooth back, and placed her leg between his. Kagawa always made the first move, but over the past weeks, Arjuna had grown bold. Kagawa stirred, gently pushed her hand away. "I can't, Arjuna, a headache." She nibbled at his earlobe and placed her hand on his warm thigh. "Arjuna." She massaged his nape, teasing the curly hairs covering his lower neck. The rest of his hair was not like that. It was dense and deep black, but not curly. A current coursed through her body. "You provocative thing," Kagawa muttered, pulling in his legs, moving his torso away from hers. "What did you say?" She burrowed her head into his furry chest, kissing his shoulders. "Go away." His eyes remained closed. He tried to stimulate him once more, in vain. She got up, sat on the bed, and watched him sleep. For a moment, she wondered what the day would have been like had they got married. She wondered what the future held. When they had set today as their wedding day, about 5 months back, she would never have imagined anything disrupting their plans, least of all Kagawa's leaving for the UK. But here they were, planning for a departure instead of celebrating. 2 hours later, Kagawa was out of bed. She heard him flush the toilet. "The cleaning woman didn't come in today," she explained by way of an apology for the mess in the living room when he joined her. Kagawa did not respond. He sat down on the narrow sofa, the only furniture they managed to squeeze into the small living room. "My Thursday schedule is killing me, Kagawa," she moaned. 2 lectures before midday, then workshops up to 8 in the evening. By Friday, when I don't have to teach, I'm too exhausted to think of cleaning. "You keep saying you'll sack the cleaning lady, but you never do it." Kagawa finally spoke, but from his tone, she deduced that the cleaning woman's ineptitude and dirty apartment was not what he wanted to talk about. They should be talking about the complications of his imminent departure for the UK. "Arjuna, you know that if I had a job, I would not be leaving. You know it has been 3 years of looking." He spoke as if talking to someone else who did not know these facts. He stood up and went to the kitchen, returning with a glass of water. "Why did I even bother with the masters, huh? What good is a man with no job, no money?" "Don't say that." She stood up, took his hand, and led him back to the sofa. "You are still everything any woman would wish for." He said nothing as he drank the water. She stroked his hands, soft as ever, and snuggled closer. After 3 years, he still made the butterflies in her stomach flutter. "I'm not getting any younger," Kagawa said eventually. "Come on, 28 is not ancient. There is still plenty of time to turn around your life, and the UK will offer more prospects. My father says, he who enters a forest with an axe cannot fail to get firewood." He's right, Kagawa. You are well equipped. A solid postgraduate qualification in economics is not something to be sniffed at. Sometimes I wish I had specialized in accounting. Economics offers a wider range of opportunities. Marketing, investment, these sectors are more developed in the UK. You think so? She stood up. They had been through this discussion before. There was nothing more for her to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Goretti. So I think a good place to start off would be what drew you about the immigrant and diasporic experience that you sought to explore in the story, and why the title Promises. Maybe you could just speak a bit about that.
Well, if I'm to start with the title, Promises, it came from, the background of the story I have read, the bit I've read, that the two main characters, Kagawa and the fiancé, Arjuna, they are both caught up in financial hardship in Uganda. And as it always happens, the grass is always greener on the other side of the way. So Kagaba has all these promises that he believes if he leaves Uganda, goes to the UK, finds a good job, gets the money, builds a house for his family, buys the car, all those are the promises that he thinks the UK will offer him. So the title came from that. And then the other question about the inspiration. So the inspiration behind this novel came from a bit of myself when I was living in the UK and meeting all these people who have expatriated themselves, so to speak, and left their home countries and gone to the UK to find those promises. And I met plenty of them and talked to them and got their stories and wanted to document them in a novel.
Fantastic. The Kampala in the story is a fictional Kampala, but I felt that reading the book, you could easily replace Kampala with Nairobi, and you just feel the same sentiments, whether it's Kagaba looking for work for 3 years and not finding any despite having a master's. So maybe speak a bit about how has Kampala changed from when you started writing the novel to today? Have you noticed any differences, or are the same agencies driving the need to make it? I can put it like that.
Well, when I started writing this novel, which is about 15 years back now, when I started writing it, I think for me, one of the most important things that stands out is that there was no social media at that time. When I started writing the novel, this was around 2008, and I did not finish writing it until about 10, 12 years later. And by that time, there was social media. So I remember it was a challenge for me because I was very enticed to make the characters communicate via social media, for example, because I took a long time writing it. But I couldn't, because when I started the novel, when I had set it out, there was no social media. So for me, that's one thing that really stood out and was a big challenge for me, to start it with no social media and then to complete it with the advent of social media. And so the only communication is through a text message, which reading it now really sounds quite out of place. Yeah.
Not just text messages, but even letters and couriers. We have the characters sending each other letters, which is a very interesting, I think, flashback to that era before social media, which I really liked. And what about on the other side of the Atlantic, if I can put it like that? What do you perceive about the diasporic experiences, how we perceive them, how we approach them at the time that you started and today, and especially around the debate that's happening about immigration right now?
Well, I wouldn't say that much has changed, really. I think the immigration story has been going on for forever. People have always moved from one part to the other. Probably now more pronounced, more topical, more in the news of what is happening. And as you say, maybe the increased sentiments of nationalism, of belonging, of questioning who belongs where, who comes where. I would say maybe that's about the only difference. But otherwise, the immigration story has been with us for forever. Yeah.
Nice. I want you to speak a bit about craft and language. There's a distinct dialect that's used by those who remain, and for those who go, there's something that happens to their accents, to the way they speak. Could you speak a bit about how you use language and why it is important for you to give them and to give your characters these distinct dialects across these different places in Kampala and in the UK?
Yeah, so language for any writer is the most important tool that you really must master if you are going to communicate. And for me, because the novel is set in two places, it is set in Kampala, it's also set in London, and my characters, some remain in Kampala and then some leave and go to live in London. And I think for many of us who have to live in two different places, language becomes part of your identity. It becomes who you are. You use language to try and fit in new environments. So, for example, there's this character, Musana, who left Uganda about 8 years back and has been living in the UK and is unable to sort his papers. And there's an incident where he goes to pick up his brother-in-law and he speaks with a British accent. He has adopted a British accent, not because he wants to, but it makes it easy to fit in. It becomes part of his identity. And he switches, like most of them. So it depends in which context you are, in which environment you are. When he's with fellow Ugandans, he drops the accent, the British accent, and speaks the way we speak, the way Ugandans we speak English. But when he's like at work, where he needs to be understood by the native English speakers, then he adopts the British accent. So I think that's what I was trying to play around with language between the characters because they are based in two places. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then speaking about characters, you have some very strong characters in people like Julia and Kalai. Maybe speak a bit about characterization and some of the inspiration behind some of these very dynamic women like Kalai and Julia.
Yeah, so this is my 5th novel, and I have always written about all my protagonists are women, as strong women. I don't think that I set out to write strong women. I think it just comes spontaneously. So yeah, I think reading the novel afterwards, I also realized that these two characters, especially the ones you mentioned, are actually strong. And when I set out to write the novel, it was Kagawa's story, the male character. And I remember the first readers complaining and saying, but this is not Kagawa's story. This is Arjuna's story. Arjuna comes across as very strong, much stronger than Kagawa. And I don't think that was intentional. But I think it's just spontaneous that I have had female characters, strong female characters throughout my novels. And I think for me, one way to answer that is I know exactly what it means to be a woman. I've been one for the last 60 years. So it comes naturally. I don't really stop to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And just looking outside, could you speak about what the current tides and the current waves of growing nationalisms and global politics, from your experience and from your movement across both Kampala and London, how do you feel the current environment, how does it affect the diasporic experiences of African communities in Western capitals from your perspective?
Well, as I've said before, that migration has been with us, but with the current sentiments, especially with what is happening in the US, with what is happening with Trump, as we all know, I think now the people who live on the margins of the law, the people who have failed to sort their papers, as we say, I think their lives have become a lot more complicated. Because in London, when I'm in London, I have never felt different. because it's such a cosmopolitan city, you'll sit on the train and hear somebody say, banange. That's a term we say a lot in Uganda. And then, if I've been having a bad day, I'm going to have a good day. Because I just turn and say, wow, this is a fellow Ugandan speaking on the phone and saying banange, and freely. I've never missed Ugandan food, because there is Ugandan food in London. And I've never had to look over my shoulder. But now I think the whole air around immigration has changed, because if you see, as you say, what's happening in the US, people being hunted down, people being accosted at their places of work, people being stopped on the street to ask them. I have a lot of my friends in the US, and they even fear to go to the supermarket anymore. So I don't think it has been this bad ever since this immigration story started. I think it has now become very, very bad. The hostility towards others, this othering thing that we talk about, I don't think it has ever been as bad as it is now.
And I think when we were speaking earlier, you actually mentioned that this edition of Promises has been produced actually in Kampala. And you have worked in the literary space for years. Maybe speak a bit about the literary space and maybe some of the shifts that you have seen in the past few years that made producing Promises in Kampala possible.
You mean about the literary spaces?
Yes, literary spaces, yeah.
Yeah, I have been doing this work, my writing, my literary activism, for the past 30 years. My first novel is celebrating its 30th birthday next year. So indeed it has been a long time. And for me, when I'm asked about that shift, about what has changed when I started writing, I think for me one word that now the young upcoming African talent in writing, in publishing, in editing, in the whole literary ecosystem, they can dream. They can hope. There is possibility. When my first novel was published, there was only one publisher, only one publishing house in the country. And you can imagine what that meant for the writers. Now we were talking of hundreds. When I was invited to go to Iowa for the Writers' Fellowship in the US, I was the first Ugandan woman to get that honor. And now, every year, there is somebody going to Iowa. So for me, the most important thing is that the possibilities have expanded. People can write, can publish their stories, can distribute their books. I'm selling my books in Nairobi, which wasn't the case at that time. So it is basically that the infrastructure that supports the writing craft has evolved, has developed, has changed, and there is more now to hope for, and the possibilities.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if anybody from the audience has a question. Yes. Just a second, let's wait for the microphone.
Okay. What do you think about AI and its influence to the young writers, and the way it's so easy now to create a story by giving certain very few information to the programs. So she was also telling me about her experience was being a judge. So how is it going to influence as well that part of your career? Thank you.
Do I take one? Okay. I can answer that, yeah. Yeah, I scare on one hand when you look at what it can do. When you type into the GP chat and say, generate for me a very compelling letter to a literary agent. And within 2 seconds, you have that. And I always sit back and marvel and say, is this possible at all? Before this will take you weeks to compose such a letter. So for me, I'm still ambivalent about AI. I think I'm still sitting on the fence when it comes to that, because on the one hand, I can see what it is doing, making lives for editors, for people whose livelihoods depend on writing, making it much easier. And on the other, that it is stealing from the craft. That's how I look at it, that it is stealing something from us. Something that we used to sit down and create. When I write a good sentence, I can feel it. And I will go out and celebrate if I craft one good sentence in a day. I can feel it, I can read it back, and sometimes an editor points it out, and I say, where? And say, maybe you'd want to compose your title around this sentence. And I write back and say, well, that's very clever. And then he says, but I got it from your book. Where? I created that. So I will go out and celebrate. So I feel AI is stealing that from us, the writers, is making that work not what it used to be, not what I used to celebrate, that I can write a good sentence. Then on the other hand, it almost feels, that's why I said the scary part, that we can't fight it. That our hands are tied, that it's growing at a speed at which we can't catch up, and that there is not much that we can do about it. So that is for me the most scary part. I don't know if I've answered you, but I'm still sitting on the fence and still trying to decide, is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is it helping with the craft? Is it destroying it? What I know for sure is it is stealing from me as a writer. It is stealing my joy, my hard work when I would sit and try to craft a sentence and not have to ask Google all the time. Google tell me which word can I use here. So, not very sure if I've answered your question here, but that's how I feel about AI.
Good morning. So first, the extract that you have read, I think it applies to I think many countries in Africa for what you have read. My question is, back in the days, I think the authors used to receive many backlash from the government themselves. I don't know if it still happens in Uganda or the backlash have reduced because of the things that have been written.
Sorry, to receive what?
Backlash. Maybe whatever you are written is interfere with the government. Then they like suppress you down, or they cancel your book. Does it still happen, or times have evolved?
Yeah, of course it still happens. It still happens, and I think as we talk now, some of the two most famous writers are in exile. One was imprisoned for 2 years for a poem she wrote on social media calling the president a pair of buttocks. So she got two years in jail for that, and she's now in exile. And another one also wrote a satirical novel about the government, and was also imprisoned and tortured, and is also in exile now. And I don't think this is surprising that as a writer, on one hand, the government will say literature or art is useless because now they are promoting the sciences. And we always say, if it is useless, so why are you harassing the writers? If they are not important, if the words are not that important, why go after them? Which means they must be important for you to harass them. So it is still happening, and you still have to find a way of going around it. And this council culture you're talking about, as you know, it's not only just in Uganda or in Africa. And what that has created is the self-suppression. I think now writers we are censoring ourselves more than even the external factors, which is really a very sad thing. But to answer your question, yes, it is still happening, and we still have to go very careful about it. You mean to change that they'll stop looking at? Well, I don't know, but I wouldn't think so. Because look at the work of a writer. What is the role of a writer if you go to that? Why do I write? I write because I'm unhappy about something. I don't write when the grass is green and the sky is blue. There's nothing extraordinary about that. I write when the status quo, to challenge the status quo. I write to interrogate a situation. I question things. I write about the establishment and ask, why is this like this? I write because I'm unhappy about something, and which political system is going to be happy with my work. It can't be. Because if you don't interrogate that, then you are failing as a writer. You're not doing your role. So in my first novel, for example, I question the privileged position of men in my society. My grandmother lived for about 80 years, and for those 80 years, she was never allowed to taste certain foods, purely because on the basis of her gender, because she was a woman. She was not allowed to eat meat, or fish, or chicken, or eggs, or pork, grasshoppers, which is a delicacy in Uganda, rabbit meat. She was never allowed to eat that. So I questioned that in my writing. I questioned the patriarchal system in my writing. I question why I don't have water running in my house. It is political. So which politician is going to be happy about that? So if I don't do that, then I'm failing. I'm not supposed to be friends with the establishment. I can't be on the side of the establishment. I have to be on the other side so I can interrogate and question and demand for answers. So I don't see that changing, not only in Uganda, but elsewhere. See how Trump what Trump is doing, censoring the writers. Yeah.
Thank you for that amazing answer. And my question sort of leads on from there. In terms of the complexity of the world that we're all living within and the need for our understanding of the world, what role can fiction play in the future in helping us to understand the role? I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I think what fiction does for us is to make us look critically at what is going on around us. Because I always ask, when you say, is that book fiction or is it a real story? I always find it difficult with that, because at least my own fiction is a realistic fiction. So I pick from what already exists. I pick from that, and I reimagine situations, I refunction, I retell, I refocus everything and package it. And when you read fiction, it's going to make you look at the world as it's happening. If somebody was to write a book about, I'm sorry, I keep going back to Trump. If somebody was to write a book, a non-fiction book about the facts, oh, Trump is a bad president or is a good president, this is what is happening, it's not going to be the same as if it was fiction, because I'm going to create a story around that. I'm going to humanize what is going on in the world. I'm going to create characters. In this novel, I write about the immigration. And we all know immigration has been with us for years and years and years. And we read about the stories of people coming on the small boats, people drowning, as statistics. So that is what nonfiction will do. That's what a newspaper article will do. That's what a journalist will do. They will report on that. There was this small boat crossing the English Channel, and 53 people died. And we read and forget about it. But what fiction is going to do is going to humanize that. It's going to create the real characters who are affected by the 53 people who have died, which will humanize who the 53 people were. So it makes you stop and think and look at the world and question and see what actually is going on around you. So it's like a mirror of society. Fiction is like that mirror that is going to make you stop and look and think and reflect and ponder and remember. I think that's most important. You know, he read my book to interview me for this. So when we were in the green room, he was talking about all the characters as if they were human beings. And we talked about them. You know what Musana does in this? You know, this is fiction. I created these characters, but he remembers. He will not remember statistic from a newspaper article or a radio or a television. So for me, I think that is what the most important role of fiction is that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we have about 12 minutes left. I was hoping maybe we could have another small reading and something from, probably something from London. I would like maybe just a small excerpt about either Julia or Musana for the audiences to appreciate.
Oh, I didn't prepare.
Just take your time. Let me hold this for you. Yes, just something from London, or one of your favorite part.
Sorry, I hadn't prepared that.
Sorry about the ambush.
I think I'll just read another section, which is based in a detention center for illegal immigrants. For illegal immigrants, when they are accosted, they are usually put in the detention center or removal center before they are deported back to their country. So I just read a small section of that. Sorry, I found it. So the character is at the detention center. What is the name of the person you'd wish to see? This time it was a youngish man behind the glass desk. Julia, Emily said. I'm sorry, I'll need a surname. Emily turned to Kagawa. He supplied it and edged closer, knowing he'd be asked to spell it. Oh, it's one of those long Nigerian names. No, it's actually Ugandan, he replied. The man scanned the computer in front of him but did not find what he was looking for. Are you sure she's at this detention center? Yes, he answered firmly. Positive. The man shook his head. I'm afraid we don't have such a person here. When was she brought in? A few days ago, Emily answered, turning to Kagawa, bewildered. I'll call Sharon, he whispered. Sharon answered on the first ring. Don't tell me you went asking for Julia, she said. What do you mean? They wouldn't have that name on record. That's her working name. Did you not know that? Sharon made him look like an imbecile, but nonetheless gave him another set of names. Too perplexed to argue, he thanked her and turned to the desk. Your passports, please. or any other photo ID? The receptionist asked. Emily handed over her driving license. For a split second, Kagawa thought of bolting. Musana's stern voice rang in his head, cautioning him several times never to carry his passport with him, arguing that if arrested, immigration wouldn't know where to deport him to and might just let him stay. He said most illegals had thrown their passports into River Thames. But he always tucked his passport in his rucksack that never left his back. If he collapsed dead, someone might contact his family back home. Living in a vast city like London made him look like an insignificant dot on earth. His passport was the only proof that he was a living organism with the right to occupy space on this limitless globe. The rest followed quickly. They were fingerprinted, scanned through the metal detector, searched, photographed, then led into the waiting room. The waiting room was half full of guests and inmates. Kagawa and Emily were pointed to a table marked 3 and told to wait. At the next table, an elderly Indian woman was whispering to her visitors, 2 teenage boys, probably her grandsons. At a table marked number 6, a middle-aged Chinese man was talking in hushed tones to somebody who looked like his wife. There was a group of Arab-looking men crowded on table 8, comforting one another, their olive skins shimmering against the unblinking light. It was difficult to tell the visitors from the residents.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. I particularly like that section. So I think we are winding down now, unless there's any other question. Provinces is out. You can get copies at Textbook Center, at Cheche Bookshop, and at Somanami. And we're also hoping to have some copies arrive before we close, in case you'd want to have some signed. Goretti is still around, and you can catch up with them or myself at any time during the festival. Thank you so much, guys, for coming through. We really appreciate your presence. Thank you, Goretti, as well. Thank you. And thank you for an amazing story.